Claire Whitmore was the kind of nurse every patient hoped for, calm under pressure, gentle in her care, and seemingly incapable of making a mistake. But behind the pressed white scrubs and warm smile was Melissa Crane, a convicted fraudster who had built her entire life in Willow Creek on forged documents, stolen credentials, and a secret that would shatter the town once it came to light. Claire Whitmore arrived in Willow Creek without fanfare, slipping into town the way a shadow slides across a room, quietly, unnoticed at first, but impossible to ignore once you see it. She became part of St. Helena Hospital almost overnight. No grand introductions, no awkward getting-to-know-you moments. One day she simply appeared in the hallway, a clipboard in hand, a stethoscope draped around her neck as if she had always been there. Her scrubs were spotless, the white fabric pressed so sharply it looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. Her movements were precise and purposeful, the kind you'd expect from someone who had spent years in the controlled chaos of healthcare. Patients were drawn to her almost immediately. There was something in her manner, a gentleness in the way she adjusted a blanket, the careful attention she gave when listening to symptoms, that made people feel safe. She seemed to know when to stand close and when to step back, when to offer comfort and when to work in silence. Some nurses can be technically skilled but cold, focused only on charts and procedures. Claire was different. She seemed to treat the person, not just the illness. For the hospital staff, she was the colleague everyone wanted on their shift. She volunteered for the long nights when the emergency room filled with accidents and flu cases, never complaining about the lack of sleep. The way she deflected questions about her family with a quick smile and a change of subject. But in a place where everyone was overworked and focused on keeping patients alive, these details passed unnoticed. Claire Whitmore had built a life in Willow Creek with careful precision, weaving herself into the hospital's fabric so tightly that removing her would seem unthinkable. No one knew that her entire identity was an elaborate construction, one that, for now, stood unshaken. But beneath the surface, the first threads of the truth were already beginning to fray. It began with something so small that most people would have brushed it aside. During a routine quarterly audit, the hospital's pharmacy staff noticed a minor discrepancy in the inventory of pain medication. At first, it was dismissed as a simple clerical error. These things happened from time to time. A nurse might sign out a vial and forget to record it, or a patient's dosage could be adjusted without the paperwork catching up. But as the days passed, the missing medication kept showing up in the reports, and the numbers weren't adding up. The losses were too consistent, too patterned to be random. The head pharmacist decided to dig deeper, cross-referencing shift schedules with prescription records. A strange pattern emerged. Every time the missing medications were logged, Claire Whitmore's name appeared on the duty roster. It wasn't proof of anything. Plenty of nurses handled these drugs, but the alignment was too precise to ignore. The discovery was passed quietly to the hospital's administration, where it lingered in the background like a low hum. At the same time, a separate incident unfolded in another part of the hospital. A patient S family had been so touched by Claire S' care that they wanted to send her a handwritten thank you card. They approached the front desk, asking for her full name and mailing address. The receptionist, wanting to be thorough, looked up Claire's information in the hospital's system. What she found was puzzling. The contact details were unusually vague. No permanent address listed, only a P.O. box. Curious, she searched for Claire's license number in the National Registry of Registered Nurses. No match came up. Thinking it was a typo, she tried again, then searched under her full name. Still nothing. It was as though the person working in their hospital, wearing their badge, and treating their patients didn't officially exist as a nurse anywhere in the country. The receptionist brought the matter to Human Resources. The HR director, assuming it was a clerical glitch, began double-checking the hiring paperwork. On the surface, it was impeccable. Transcripts, references, certifications. But when she tried to verify the university degree, the Registrar's office reported that no one by the name of Claire Whitmore had ever graduated from their program. The listed hospitals where she had supposedly worked either couldn't to confirm her employment or had no records at all. The findings began to stack up like ominous clouds. The missing medication, the untraceable license, the unverifiable education and work history. Still, no one wanted to believe it. Claire had been nothing but professional, kind, and competent. The idea that she could be lying about something so fundamental felt absurd. And yet, the evidence whispered otherwise. Behind closed doors, the hospital's leadership debated what to do. If they confronted her too soon and were wrong, it could damage her reputation forever. If they waited and she truly was unqualified, or worse, someone could get hurt. They decided to keep watching, quietly gathering information, even as Claire continued to move through the wards with the same steady, reassuring presence that had made everyone trust her in the first place. Unseen by most, the ground beneath her carefully built life was beginning to shift. The first cracks had appeared and they were spreading. The investigation into Claire Whitmore's past started quietly, handled by a small group who understood the need for discretion. They began by pulling every piece of information she had provided during her hiring process. Her resume, references, and certifications were laid out in neat stacks. But as each item was checked, pieces began to crumble away. The degree certificate from the university looked authentic, complete with a raised seal and the signature of the dean. But when the Registrar's office reviewed it, they confirmed it was a forgery. The references, too, were suspicious. Phone numbers connected to prepaid mobile lines, and the people who answered seemed to know exactly what to say, as if reading from a script. Deeper background checks revealed something far more troubling. Claire Whitmore wasn't her real name. The person working at St. Helena Hospital was actually Melissa Crane, a woman with a criminal record in another state. 5 years earlier, Melissa had been convicted of identity theft and credit card fraud, serving a short sentence before being released on parole. After that, she had vanished from public records, resurfacing only when she appeared in Willow Creek under a new identity. The transformation had been thorough. Melissa had obtained forged identification documents, driver's license, social security card, and even a professional nursing license that matched the fabricated history of Claire Whitmore. Investigators discovered that she had stolen the personal information of a real nurse who had moved overseas. That nurse's legitimate credentials became the backbone of the persona Melissa created. As her real history unfolded, so did the darker side of her activities at St. Helena. The missing medication wasn't an accident. Melissa had been carefully removing small amounts over time, ensuring no single incident would raise alarms. These drugs, mainly high-value painkillers, were being sold to contacts in a nearby city. Her shifts were deliberately chosen to coincide with low staffing, giving her freedom to access supply rooms without oversight. She kept meticulous notes, not in the hospital's digital system, but in a private ledger she carried with her that detailed each withdrawal and where it was sent. What baffled investigators was how convincingly she played the role of a nurse. Even without formal training, Melissa had absorbed medical knowledge from years spent working in low-level healthcare jobs, combined with what she learned online. She knew enough to avoid obvious mistakes, enough to gain the trust of doctors and patients alike. And she didn't just fake her way through. She performed her duties well enough that no one had reason to doubt her competence. It was a perfect balancing act, blending genuine care with calculated deception. But perfection never lasts. Each new fact gathered by investigators made it clear that they weren't dealing with a desperate opportunist. Melissa Crane was methodical, deliberate, and dangerous in her ability to manipulate appearances. The deeper they dug, the more one question loomed over the hospital. How long could she keep up the lie before someone got hurt in a way that couldn't be undone? The decision to move in on Melissa Crane came after weeks of quiet surveillance. The evidence was overwhelming, but the hospital and police agreed there could be no mistakes. They needed to catch her in possession of stolen medication to ensure the case would hold in court. It was late November when the plan was set in motion. The temperature had dropped sharply overnight, and the wind rattled the hospital's windows like restless fingers. Melissa was scheduled for a night shift in the medical ward, a shift she had volunteered for, as always. Police officers dressed in plain clothes waited in unmarked cars just beyond the hospital's parking lot. Inside, 2 members of hospital security were instructed to keep a discreet watch on her movements. Surveillance cameras in the supply areas were monitored in real time. The goal was to let her walk into the trap without realizing it existed. The night began like any other. Melissa moved through the wards with quiet efficiency, checking patient charts, adjusting IV lines, and offering reassuring smiles. There was no sign of nervousness. To anyone watching casually, she was simply a nurse doing her job. But just after midnight, she headed toward the supply room, a place where the hospital's most tightly controlled medications were stored. The supply room door clicked shut behind her. She swiped her access card, unlocking the cabinet containing the narcotics. Her movements were calm, practiced. She placed several vials into a small zippered pouch she carried, slipping it into the deep pocket of her scrubs. On the surveillance monitor, one of the security officers made a call. The trap was closing. Melissa stepped back into the corridor, pushing a cart loaded with supplies for her next round. That was when the hallway ahead filled with figures: 2 uniformed police officers, the head of security, and a hospital administrator. The officers approached her without raising their voices, but their presence was unmistakable. One asked her to stop. She froze for just a fraction of a second, the only break in her otherwise composed demeanor, before being told she was under arrest. Her locker was searched immediately. Inside, officers found several more vials of medication, carefully wrapped in gauze and hidden inside a toiletry bag. In her handbag, they discovered cash bundled with rubber bands, along with a notebook containing patient names, prescription details, and quantities of drugs taken over the past 2 months. The final blow came when police searched her car in the staff parking lot. Beneath the passenger seat was a cardboard box filled with sealed pill bottles, each labeled with the hospital's pharmacy code. Alongside them lay the forged nursing diploma and photocopies of the stolen identity documents she had used to become Claire Whitmore. By the time she was escorted out of the building in handcuffs, the hospital staff had begun to hear whispers of what had happened. Some watched from doorways as she passed, unable to reconcile the image of the calm, capable nurse with the reality of the woman being led away into the cold night. The illusion had shattered, and with it, the trust she had so carefully built. The trial of Melissa Crane began 3 months after her arrest, drawing intense attention from the small community of Willow Creek and beyond. The courtroom was packed each day, filled with reporters, curious locals, and former patients who struggled to reconcile the woman they had trusted with the crimes she was accused of. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, beginning with the forged documents that allowed her to gain employment at St. Helena Hospital. They presented the fake nursing diploma, the counterfeit license, and the stolen identity of the real Claire Whitmore, who had been living overseas completely unaware of the impersonation. Witnesses were called to describe the missing medication and the impact on hospital operations. The pharmacist detailed the inventory discrepancies, explaining how Melissa had consistently removed controlled substances from the supply. Police officers recounted the night of her arrest, the discovery of drugs in her locker, handbag, and car. The notebook found in her possession was shown to the jury, each page a careful log of stolen narcotics and their eventual destinations. It was a mountain of evidence, and on its surface, the case seemed airtight. But the defense approached the trial from a different angle. They did not deny that Melissa had worked under a false identity or that she had taken medication. Instead, they tried to paint her as a complicated figure, someone whose actions were wrong, yet not entirely malicious. They brought in patients who testified that Melissa had gone above and beyond in their care. One man credited her with saving his life by recognizing the signs of an allergic reaction before it became fatal. Another described how she had performed CPR when no one else was nearby, keeping him alive until a doctor could take over. The defense argued that Melissa possessed real skill, knowledge she had gained through years of unofficial work in healthcare settings and personal study. They claimed she had never misdiagnosed a patient, never caused direct harm, and that the drugs she stole were not used to feed an addiction, but to help pay off debts and survive financially after years of hardship. The implication was clear. She was both a criminal and, in some ways, a caregiver. The prosecution countered by reminding the jury that good intentions did not erase the danger she had posed. Practicing medicine without proper qualifications put lives at risk, even if nothing had gone wrong yet. They emphasized that her deception had been deliberate and sustained, built on layers of lies that took advantage of the hospital's trust. When the jury retired to deliberate, the air in the courtroom felt heavy. Hours passed before they returned with a verdict. Guilty on all charges: fraud, practicing without a license, and possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in prison, noting the calculated nature of her crimes. As she was led away, some in the courtroom wept, others stared in silence. Melissa Crane, once admired as the perfect nurse, had become a cautionary tale. Yet the memory of the lives she had saved lingered, leaving the town with a question it could never quite answer. Was she entirely a villain, or something far more complicated?